Not sure if anybody else can see me. I'm having trouble getting this started. Oh, there we go. Okay, I am there. All right. Sorry about that. Turn the volume off on my laptop. Hello, Penny. Yeah, I like these guys. They're a really fun set. It comes, I'll scoot these over, with the 4 people and then the little word art that can fit on all of their t-shirts. And then there's a secondary stamp set that has all these little icons that then you can also do instead of that on their little t-shirts. So it's 2 separate stamp sets, but I like the people because they've got nice open faces and you can really use them to do some coloring. So we'll give people a couple minutes to join us. And then we will get started. All right. So I'm just going to slowly get started, even though the only person I'm seeing here is Penny, which I love you, Penny. And I'm thrilled that you're here watching. I don't know if the comments aren't going or... Although it says there's 2 people. So that's because it's me. Never mind. It's my laptop watching. So Penny, you and I will do some coloring, or you can be listening while you're crafting. So I initially, this was part of a release a few months back, and I really like it because of the open faces and the simplified the hair that has some detail, but not so much that you can't kind of experiment with it. So I had actually done a YouTube tutorial using the one figure and demonstrating how you could start collecting skin and hair tones using a repetitive stamp and then collecting those color combinations on cards. You could do a full 8.5 by 11. If you wanted to do, this is just your standard kind of quarter sheet that I will trim these down for cards. And so I have a bunch of these sitting around. And if you had a little like card storage system, you could easily kind of put these little note cards in there, or you could even do some hole punches and make your own little kind of neat book for that. But we recently had a request more specifically for some darker skin tones. So we're not really going to look at hair. And I will tell you this, what I run into is I run out of skin tone options or possibilities way faster than I run out of hair, because I can take, I mean, you've got the whole range of brunettes from light into dark, but then you also have redheads, you also have blondes, you also have black hair, you have gray hair, you have, and then the whole gamut now, because basically you can have any color of hair and variations thereof, which I am a testament to that, running around with currently half blue, half brown. So the hair if you're doing hair, I would pick a simple figure like this where it's really easy and fast to do. And this little bob gives me enough information, but it colors really fast. And so I think it's one of these perfect images to do that. And the other thing I like about using a single image is that when I'm sitting them side by side and making really small changes, so something like the skin tone on these two, it actually ends in the same number. So like I've got E01 on both of these, but I started with an E50 or an E000. By having the same figure, the same shape, I can see that direct comparison of those two skin tone variations where I've just changed a single marker on light skin tone, where the underbase being that E000 creates a much pinker, peachier color versus the E50 that kind of tones it down, has a little bit more of a yellow base to it. To me, a little more realistic looking, but anyway, I like that. I find that having the same figure kind of working my way across. But that being said, sometimes it's fun to give yourself a little bit more mental gymnastics to work your way through. So I went ahead and did 3 of the figures from the stamp set, and I did them a couple times. And then this truly was just a card I'd done earlier, thinking in terms of if I wanted more information. I actually, on a quarter sheet, I really like the 3 across, and whichever figure you picked, or if you picked a combination, the 3 across works really well. If you did an 8.5 by 11, you can obviously do 4 across and probably do at least 3 rows, if not a little more. You'd have to play around with that and which person you pick too. All right, so we are talking, there was a question about darker skin tones specifically, and so that is what we're going to cover tonight, and we're going to look at that and see what we can do figuring out some darker ones. Now, I'm not going to do hair tonight, and if that's something you guys are really interested in seeing, that's absolutely something you can stick in the comments. And I'm just going to throw that out there. If there's people watching and have questions, please ask. I'm actually not seeing anyone, so I'm a little concerned that either I'm not on there or you guys can't hear me. I hope someone will type that in if for some reason it's not working. I'm going to assume we're good. And I am just going to keep going. Not seeing, I'm double checking over here to see if I see anything else. Nope, and it seems like it's working, so we'll just assume it is. Okay. So we're going to start with some, what I would call kind of mid-range skin tones and work into darker. And some of these are going to have combinations that are using a variety from the earth tone family, meaning they're not going to be right in a little natural blending group. And that has to do with the numbering system, whole nother issue, but we're going to kind of go from there. So what I'll do is I'm just going to work through at least 4 or 5 of these just so you guys can see some darker variations, and then we'll kind of go from there. If people are here and want to see more, we'll kind of play that by ear. So one of the questions I was asked recently was about Asian skin tones, because I do some darker range skin tones, but I have never focused in and tried to look at Asian skin tones specifically. So my first response is go to photographs and look up a bunch on Google. And the 2 color combinations that I really, really like, and I really wanted to share with you guys today because I feel like they are worth knowing. Let me find a good pen to write these down with so you guys can see them well. We're going to do an E50, an E53, and then an E55. And right next door to that, we're going to do an E50, and then an E31, and an E50. 5, 5. And again, because they're sitting side by side, you guys are going to get a really good chance to see that direct comparison. And that's what I'm wanting for you, so you can, when you start collecting these yourself, you have a really good sense of what those are going to look like and making good choices about what you want on your page. And then you don't have to do as much experimenting off to the side. All right, so I'm going to start with E50, and I'm going to start with my little girl to begin with. I'm not going to worry a whole lot about avoiding her eyebrows, because a lot of times the hair color is going to be darker than the skin tone. And I'll kind of, as we get into darker, like the really deep skin tones, we'll adjust that thinking. And I'll kind of show you what I do at that point. I am going to try to avoid the whites of her eyes. I'm not necessarily going to come down and do the arms. This is, again, I'm just playing around with color, so I'm not as concerned about getting the full figure colored. If you feel better about getting that all done, go for it. The arms do not take very long. Okay, and this one is going with that natural blending group, in that we have all E's, all starting with a 5, and then we have a 0, 3, and 5. Okay, so we're looking for E5, 3. We're gonna make sure we get this little face looking nice and round. We're gonna come under the eyes, a little bit over, and then it'll come back under her little cheekbone a little bit. So she has this little pocket of light. We're going to do the same thing down the second side. It comes in and goes under the eye, a little bit over the eye, in, right under the cheekbone, and then along the jawbone. And that happens on both sides. You can go kind of right along that edge of her hairline. She doesn't have bangs hanging over. Hello, Kim. I'm glad you're here. So we don't need necessarily a heavy shadow up here, but we want it to look round. And I'm going to do both edges of her little neck. And you could definitely argue that this full thing across the neck. Kim saying, and she did not get a notification. I have no idea, Kim, what's going on. I think Facebook is going through a bunch of stuff. We're going to go in. You do not need to worry about it. I am glad you're fixing a wonderful dinner. All right, inside the ears, because the outer edge, if you ever look at photos, those are going to stay lighter. And the inner ear, as it goes into the head, that'll get darker. So this is kind of the general shading. And then we're going to go one darker. This is an E55. And again, the best part now is I just do these same areas in smaller amounts. So I'm still going to come in from the side. I'm going to aim right up to the side of that eye. I'm just not going to go as far underneath. I'm not going to come out as far along the jawline, under the cheekbone. I'm going to keep it pretty tight into the edge. And hello, Tammy. And then we're coming over to the other side, repeating that process. And she's looking really dirty, and I appreciate that. We're gonna clean her up here in just a second. And I'm gonna go right into those interior ears. So this is gonna be as dark as this gets out here. This one is. But now we have to hit reverse, because obviously right now we've got this very stylized looking kind of almost road map or topographical map effect going. So we need to go back to our midtone, which is that E53. We're going to go right along the edge of that darker color and pull it out a little bit. And so that midtone is actually going to come a little further across the face. So she's going to get a little bit darker, but that's what's going to soften the edge of that E55. The one thing I didn't do, and I can do it now because a lot of times the nose doesn't get as dark. I am going to pick one side of her nose to kind of go down the edge. I typically do not do both. I feel like on small images like this, I run into trouble. They end up looking a little piggish. And then E50. And this one, I'm going to go right into that mid-tone, but then it's going to go all the way across all of those areas that are that highlight that have stayed that lighter color. So it'll work back into that mid-tone and even maybe touch that darker edge. But then I definitely want to go all the way across the light area. And that is going to smooth that out so I don't have like a wet mark where the wet and dry ink hit. Go right underneath, under her neck. And again, the neck could actually be that mid-tone color and kind of leave it at that. But this to me, and you'll see it as it dries, because remember, this is actually fairly wet right now. This is going to change color a little bit as it dries. But this is one variation to me that works pretty well for an Asian skin tone. But I want to show you a second one that I experimented with a little bit, and you'll be able to see them kind of directly side by side. And then we'll keep getting darker here as we go through a few color combos. So we're going to start with the E50 again. And I'll kind of try to keep looking over. If you guys have other questions, please ask. And I did say at the beginning, Tammy and Kim, that if people were doing really just skin tonight, but if people are really interested in like specifically skills with hair, that's another thing we could come back and really just look at the hair as well. To me, tackling both of those sometimes is a little bit tricky. So this is the one I'm going to change up that mid-tone. So this time I'm going to go with an E31. And thank you, Tammy. I appreciate that. And the reason for that is the E31 has this little bit of almost an olive undertone to it. It's kind of a unique one within the E3s. So the E31 to me is a good one to kind of play with in the mix. And so this is one that I found that I really like this combination, and I didn't know until I really tried it. So I'm using this exact same roadmap that we did on the first little face. It's going to look almost identical. The shape of his face is really similar. So even though I've got different images, I'm going to have a really similar. I'm going to go ahead and do the neck a little bit darker. And Kim, we could absolutely do a hair. We could do it on this, or we could pick out a couple images that have longer hair that might be trickier, or show different hairstyles. So we could do a couple different things with that. And this little guy, I feel like his nose looks like we might need to put it on the opposite side, just because of the way the hint of that nose is over here. So here's my mid-tone, and that's that E31. But we're going to jump back to the E55. And again, it just happens in less amounts, so it stays way out to the edges. And what I noticed right away with the first time I did this little color combination is this E55 and the E31 actually look like they go better together than they do with their own color families. They partner up incredibly well. And I think what you can already see is that this skin tone is going to have a lot more gray in it. It's definitely yellowed down. Hello, Carla. So glad you are here as well. It's always nice to have Carla or Kim here, because then if I'm missing questions, I know they are there helping us out. It's greatly appreciated. I'm going to go back to, and thanks Kim for the link, back to my mid-tone. Now this, remember, where I'm looking for is if I see places where I can see, I just used the wrong mid-tone, didn't I? Someone take that one off my table. So it's that E31. So I'm looking for places where I can see that line between the dark and the mid-tone, and come in and soften that a bit. And it's always nice to have someone who's got your back, Kim, so thank you. And I think I'll go a little bit further under that hairline because now he has a fairly significant bang, so I can do a little more there and then go all the way down. And obviously there's a big gap here, but what I found is even then I could still blend these together pretty good. And remember, you do need to go all the way across that highlight area so we don't end up with any of those watermarks. And the best part is when you do this, if you're truly doing it just to collect the color combinations, we're not looking for perfection at all. But if I'm really doing this to add this particular image to a card, I can now go back and play. If I feel like I didn't come across the jawline very much enough, or if I feel like, you know, I really feel like he needs a little bit of a hint of shadow under his nose to kind of give that form a little bit push, I can still go back and forth a little bit. Always one of the beauties of most alcohol markers, and I know the Copics work really well for that. So there is a second color combination, and even though like the little boy is not completely dry now, I think you can see that there is a distinct difference just changing that middle color, where the one ends up getting much more grayed down. And when I looked at photos of kind of Asian, culturally Asian people, there were this range between this more kind of gray, almost bluish undertones to the skin to those peachy, warmer undertones. They both have that yellowish, a little bit of a yellowish tone to them. So the E5s do work really well for that. But the E31, putting that in the mix, adds that little bit of that gray, which to me, again, this until you start playing with color, you don't find those combinations. So that's part of the beauty of this. So there's two that are, it's not truly a light skin tone, but it's just inching up that chain. They blend really easily together. And so these are great combos to kind of keep in your back pocket of something right in that mid-range. A third one that's going to be in that mid-range, we're going to go one step up, and we're going to do it again kind of in two spots, or show you two variations. This is going to get darker, but not, again, still not super dark. And of course, I'm hiding markers on myself. This happens regularly. Come on, there it is. Okay, so the next little group we're going to look at is, and this is a more standard one, you're going to see this more often, E11, E13. And I'll color as many as we have time for, so don't fret about that. And then over here, we're going to do E11, E13, and E15. All right, so we're going to go into some deeper, warmer colors, and then we're going to go push it even further and get it darker on the second one. So let's start with the one that only has the two. And I should make a note of this now, and I'll try to remember to say it again, is that all of these combinations, you can add those deepest shadows with like a blue violet or a violet. That's a whole nother level that you can push those even further. So let's get through several of our skin tones, and then if we want to play a little bit with blue violets, we can do that as well. Okay, sorry, obviously have more verbiage to share with you all today. Haven't used all my words yet. So E11 is where we're going to start. The E1s end in kind of a real brick tone to them. Thank you so much, Carla. So the E1s, that whole series kind of goes brick red on us. So knowing that in advance kind of helps us aim what we're doing or know where this is going to go. So these are going to definitely have a redder undertone than some of the other earth tones. It's not going to be peachy. It's not going to have a yellowish undertone. It's going to go very red. So this is literally the lightest color in this series, is this E11. So you can already see that this is going to be a deeper skin tone from the get-go. And I tend to do light to dark on skin because for me, I really want those skin areas kind of blended smoothly. And for me, that's one of the ways I do that. But you, again, there's a lot of ways to do this. All right, same shape face. We're going to come in from each side along the edge and we're going to round that out and we're going to push those eyes back because our eyes are further back in our face than our noses. Our noses stick out, so they hold on to that highlight, giving you all sorts of bonus info. We'll get the neck a little darker again. I think that just looks a little better. Again, she doesn't have a huge heavy bang that comes across her forehead. It's slow. Hers is a no bang do that comes across that side. Her nose, because of the lines the artist has given us, we've got her turned a little bit to the side so we can use that. And if you want to add the shadow down one side of the nose, it's going to be over there. If you want to include a little bit under the nose, you can. And for this one, we're staying with these two colors, so it's pretty subtle. So I'm going to come back to E11 right away. Going to start on that mid-tone and pull right across into that lighter area. It's going to be really soft. And I can always add more. Remember, you can always go back and get those a little bit heavier. I think in this case, I'm going to do a little more with my E13 right at that edge. And this is so wet at this point. A lot of the blending is happening without me even touching it with my secondary, my lighter color. I'm going to get a little bit darker right along those edges. I like that a whole lot better because now I've got that push back at those edges. But this is someone who's either a big tanning fan, whether it's outside or in a tanning bed, or to me, this has more of an Indian looking skin tone. So Native American, Asian Indian, that deeper kind of reddish brown, to me, that lends itself that direction. And someone is welcome to take that a different direction than I am, but those are those reddish undertones that I feel like I see there. So now we're going to sneak in and I'm going to show you to do the same color combination, but we're going to go darker. So the only thing we're going to do is instead of just the 2 layers, we're going to add a third. So we're going to start exactly the same way. And don't worry, I'll pull that one back over. But we're going to go ahead and color our lightest, which in this case is that E11. And then we'll use the E13 to kind of map out our shading again and finish it with an E15. So it's going to get another stage darker. But there's, I think, what I have realized over the years that I have been doing this now is there are way more color combinations than I first imagined where skin tones are concerned. Not as many as hair, but there's a lot more to the skin tone kind of area that I can explore and experiment with my Copic markers. So don't get stuck using your 1 or 2 color combinations that you fall back on. And I know we all have our favorites, but I'd encourage you to try some more. So the E15 comes in smaller amounts, just like our other ones where we had 3 color combinations going to stay in those darkest areas. Doesn't necessarily need to go all the way across her forehead because we know there's not a real heavy bang there. It doesn't come all the way under her jaw. You can debate on the nose whether you want to add that right into the edge of the nose or not. That part to me is kind of back and forth. Hey, Melanie. Glad you're checking in. But now again, we have that kind of topographical map. So we're going to step back to E13, starts in the dark. Depending on how dry your ink is, you may need to go all the way out to that edge. If it's still pretty wet, a lot of times you can kind of just pull at that little edge and pull it into that area. And then I need to immediately, oops, didn't get, and she doesn't have ears to contend with. I forgot on the mom, there are no ears. And then jump to my E11. And again, starting at the edge of my midtone, but then pulling all the way across. Now you might have noticed the one place I'm not hitting is the inside edge. When I create that kind of line with the shading on the nose, a lot of times with my light, I'll come right up to that and leave that one edge a little bit crisper, because think of it, what that is, it's the bridge of your nose. And so that helps create that length and that line. Okay, so here is the exact same color combination, E11, E13, and then over to the right, we've added E15. So again, very slight variation, adds a little more depth in that color, gets it a touch darker. But if you're looking for variations and you have a specific goal in mind about what you're doing, this is to me one of the easier go-to kind of mid-range color combos. I feel like it works really well for a lot of people and have a lot of success with that. So 2 really good ones to kind of have in the middle range. Again, darker than our first 2 that we started with, but not getting all the way dark. So there are 2 more. Here we go. So then the question is, if I want to go even darker, where do I go from here? So I'm going to show you, we'll do at least 2, and then we can decide how dark we want them to go or how much we want to do beyond that. But I have a couple combinations that I use fairly frequently, finding them all. Okay, markers everywhere. So the first one is using a series of E3s, and I'll just, because these are going to be completely different. This is going to be an E31, E33, and E35, and then possibly an E25. So I'm going to put that down here, and we'll decide if we're adding that in at the end. If we want to really see 2 significantly darker skin tones, we're going to probably need to add that E25. And I think you'll see as we get going kind of what happens here. So the technique that I'm going to show you is going to be the same on these 2 images. And what I'm doing, because I want to get so dark with that skin tone, I'm literally going to put, just like if you were painting a wall in your home, and this is how I tell all of my students when I'm teaching, Thank you, Melanie. When you are painting a wall in your home and you want it to be red, or if you decided you wanted it to be navy, something that has really deep color, if you went right in and did a red paint on a white wall, a white, base coated wall, what happens? You just don't get that rich, deep red that you're looking for. Well, we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to get these really rich, deep colors, but on white paper. So when I am going to a darker skin tone, I start with a color. So in this case, I'm starting with this E31, and by the end, you're not going to see any of that. It will be gone. But again, it's the same concept of painting that red wall, and that we're trying to almost put a primer coat down to get rid of the white and then build up from there. So that's tip number one when you're going really dark. You might need to start with a color that you never intend to show through, but that is going to get you more easily where you want to go. So this first color is E31. And again, you'll notice I went right over her eyebrows. What will happen with this one is as I get into the darkest color, I might try to avoid the eyebrows, but I don't need to worry about it because I know I'm still going to have a darker hair color than what I'm currently using. So that's the E31, got a nice coat on there. E33, so this time I'm truly going straight through again that kind of natural blending group, same shape. At this point, this is the fun part about just repeating faces over and over again, is I really have down now the shape that I'm going for. And so I don't have to think about that part of it as much. Now I should slow down a little bit because now I'm bumping out of edges, but other than that, all of us can use that knowledge. So this is my secondary color, and that one again is really mapping out where all the rest is going to go. And this is where all the shading is going to go, just like this. Thank you, Carla. Have a wonderful dinner. Now here's the trick. If I already know that I'm going to do 4, and I'm going to go ahead and add this in so you guys can really see this and you'll be able to see the technique twice. So I've got my primer down and then I've got my kind of mapping down. That was the E33. My next one is actually going to cover up what I just did with the E35. And I promise this is going to make sense when we get it all done. So I'm literally going to make that disappear. So I'm going to go, that was really as much as anything to kind of map out where I wanted this to go. Because in the end, believe it or not, this dark color is going to be my mid-tone. So this is going to get considerably darker. So there we go. I've kind of gone all the way over everything I just did with that lighter tone. And for a lot of people, that's a nice in-between step, because then they don't feel like if they make a mistake, they can't correct it. So there's that. Now I'm going to add my shadow color, which is that E25, smaller amounts. So right at the edge. And E25 is just barely darker than that E35, but it's just enough to push that back a little further. And you'll see it. Comes in right along those edges, right into the corner of that eye. We've got a lot of ink on there. Inner ear, inner ear. And I can barely see the transition between my E25 and my E35. So that's going to be up to you when you're doing this. Do I need to go back and do more with my E35? I'm not sure. I might have a couple little spots and I could pull it a little further, but I'm not going to need to do much. Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty smooth. Here's the big fun part to me. So we went back to the E35. I'm going to actually come back to the E33. And this is where that E31 is literally going to disappear. So what I do, and this is the way I do it, I start right in on the edge of that E35, and I'm going to kind of soften it, and then I'm going to go all the way across that highlight area. So I soften, get it really nice and wet so it starts dissolving and kind of mixing in, blending in, and then pull that across. Again, depending on how wet or dry your ink is, this part takes a little practice. And this is where the darker skin tones get a little harder because we're layering all of this ink. Here we go. So here's the trick. A lot of times people are like, okay, you made that look way too easy. Remember how many times I've been doing this. Remember what my job is, and that is to teach people how to do this. So I do this a lot. I'm supposed to make it look easy and fun. That's my job. And so I practice it, but also even in teaching it, I've done it hundreds and hundreds of times. So that last step of coming all the way across the face with that mid-tone color, what we would have thought was a mid-tone, in this case, the E33, that does take some practice. And if the faster I can work and keep those outer edges wet and then pull that across, the easier, because I have to get that part smooth and create those soft edges. Most of the time, what happens is we lose the highlight areas that because you're having to do more working at the blending, we lose some of those highlights. So one optional step, only if you feel like it's gone flat, is that you can come back with the lightest color, which is that E31, the one that we can't see anymore. You could come back and you could hit a couple of those little areas where you'd like to see a little more highlight with that lighter color. And it's going to work almost like a colorless blender does, but it has that earth tone in it. So again, we're not playing around with white, we're playing around with that kind of primer base color. And so that kind of smooths some of those out if you need to. In this case, I probably wouldn't have, because I feel like I've got a nice contrast between my lights and darks, but you can. So here is a series of E33s, and then I finished with an E25. You could finish with the E37. That's another one you could play around with. But this is one that I knew I had had some very good success with, and so I really like it. So we're going to shift, and I'm going to show you another dark skin tone that's as dark as this. And so you guys can see that process one more time, and I'm going to do it exactly the same way. Thank you, Kim and Tammy. So we're going to go E21. So again, I'll put our little clue words over here. This is my primer. So eventually we will not see that. And then we've got an E23. This is actually going to be my light by the end. I've got an E25 in this case. So this one's going to actually get darker. This is actually going to be my mid-tone. And then E27. And this is going to be the shadow color or the dark. So this works exactly the same way as those four terms. This is what I did over here, but maybe some of that will help you remember if that's helpful. I don't know. I always try to give you guys as many little pieces of hints and stuff. So we're going to start with an E21, get the skin based. And again, remember this is the pink paint for the red wall. No intent of this being the final color, but it's going to help us get away from that white of the paper. There we go. So E21, E23 is next. So people always ask about earth tones and the difference between them. And I would say the E2s are kind of a chocolatey brown. That's the word I would describe. It goes kind of from a milk chocolate in the E23, E25 range, all the way to a dark chocolate. And why not use chocolate? It's the best thing in the world to describe a color. So to me, the way I remember it is the E2s are kind of a chocolatey brown. The E3s are what we would call a sepia tone, in that they have a little bit more of a red, but both the E21s and the E23s have a very neutral brown. If you're looking for something right in the middle that's kind of a neutral brown, either the E2s or the E3s are going to be ones that are kind of your go-to earth tones. Both of those color groupings kind of in the earth tone area. So now we're getting dark. So remember what we did with our mid-tone? We mapped it out with our light, which was the E23. Now our mid-tone's going to come in and cover that up. That truly was just figuring out where to put it. And a lot of times if I've done this over and over, like now that I've done these little groups of faces, I wouldn't necessarily need to do that map out step. But in this case, I feel like it's still worth doing that because I'm showing you guys kind of how I have found is easiest for me. So again, kind of going over all of those little spots, because this is literally going to be our mid-tone color. You can tell right away, this is going to go dark. And then the E27 is our shadow color. So this is going to hang out right at those edges, coming right at the corner of the eyes. Now, I will tell you right here and now that as you get into colors that are this dark and you start layering them up, this is where a lot of people have trouble with their ink looking sticky or shiny. So in these darker colors, I am trying to use a fairly light hand, especially when I'm coming in and just adding the shading in, that shape, that form creating shape. I try to be as light as possible, use as little ink as possible to push back in those areas. Okay, back to my mid-tone. Find those spots that I need to pull out. There's not many. These two colors are pretty close. The big jump is going to be that next jump when I come across. Actually, that worked okay. I'm not going to fiddle there. So the big jump, I've got this really extreme variation now. So I'm going to grab my E23 and just like I did over here, I'm going to come in, I'm going to hit the edge, and then pull all the way across. Hit the edge. Hit those edges. If I need to go further back in, I can. Don't forget those little ears. And again, I can play from here. If I feel like it got too light, and obviously his eyebrows look a little bit funny, but when I go back into his hair, chances are his hair is going to be darker. Now, for some bizarre reason or some unusual reason, because it does happen these days, this person has chosen to stay with a lighter color on their hair, or they've gotten really dark in the sun and actually have a lighter color hair. I can still leave those lighter at this point. So after that primer where I color everything, a lot of times I'll try to avoid the eyebrows. You can see on both of the darker skin tones now where I've done that. So here are two really dark skin tones. But you can see that whole scale, and I'll bring that over so you can see this whole range of kind of lighter, middle, and really dark. That, again, it's not our standard. The two that I see the most used out there are like an E000 and an E01, or an E00 and an E02. I do too, Melanie. Melanie's saying how much she loves those really deep values, and I do as well. So these are, I love these color combinations, and I think they're good if you're trying to add some darker skin tones in. This is, I mean, here's 6 different combinations that are easy to add in. Both of these tones, and maybe that's what we kind of finish with, you could take that darkest color off and keep them slightly lighter. So let's do that. Let's see, I'm trying to think. Ooh, it's almost 7. So let's do at least one of them so you guys can see the difference by pulling that darkest tone off. Let's do this one, because this one is kind of nice to see in that one tone lighter. Let's do that, and then we'll take a really quick peek at the blue violets added on some of those, and we will call it a night, because it's actually an hour. And I know these are never timed, but I know some of you kind of, that's what you set aside. So we're going to go E31, E33, and E35. And that's where we're going to stop on this one. We're not going to go darker. Of course, I think I put those. No, I set them to the side. Nice. Gotta love it when they're still sitting there ready to go. Okay. So, but now I've kind of talked you through some of this process. So we're going to go E31. And so even though we're not going as dark, we're going to use a pretty similar process. Kim says, never a time limit. Nah, we're good. So we're going to get that nice kind of primer coat. And I know that's a funny way to word that, but in my head, that's kind of what's happening. So I always use that as my reference. And then E33. So the process is going to look almost identical to what we did on that darker, that much darker one. I heard rumor, Melanie, that yours go pretty long. I love it. The best part of doing these recordings, though, is the fact that people can come back and forth and watch them when they want. And I think that's huge. It really is, because people can play them in the background while they're cooking dinner and, you know, bring them into the kitchen on their iPads, and you can still get all the information even if you don't see the whole thing. But you can do it while you're doing other things, which I think is really cool. So E35 is next, but now remember, this time we're not going to go quite as dark. So I'm going to keep this a little bit further out to the edge, treat it just like it is my shadow. And I've got a pretty big jump in between the E31 and that E33. So it'll take a little bit more work to do some blending, but it's going to work. promise. Thanks, Jennifer. So I tell the people who take my classes, and you guys too, I am a pretty good colorer. I do pretty good with my Copic markers. Here's that mid-tone, and it's gonna come part way across. It's gonna go a little bit further, but I want all those edges nice and juicy wet. But what I'm really good at is teaching. It's what I meant to do. It's what I love to do. And so I love having people who want to learn. So then I'm going down, this time I'm going down to that primer color, that light color, and I'm gonna come in, and this is gonna go ahead, just like we did on those early ones, this is gonna be my highlight color again, and I'm gonna wet it, and then I can make a decision. So at this point, I kind of take a step back, sit up, because I'm hunching down and my nose is 2 inches away from my paper, and decide, did this get dark enough? Did it not pull out far enough? Are there places where it didn't get smooth? I felt like it was funny. It wasn't as smooth around the eyes that I like. So I'm coming back and hitting that a second time with my darkest. And while that lightest color is wet, in fact, I'm going to go in and add, this is that E31, really lightly. I'm going to bring my mid-tone and go like literally brush. But see, it's so wet, it's just going to blend right in. And stop. Stop there. But while that ink is super wet, that one pass, and I can't see the strokes, but it keeps it lighter. So I can't see the E31 completely, but it's definitely lighter. So let's take a look. Here is, and I apologize, this is something I would tell people never to do. I have two different papers, and you can maybe even see it on the screen. One has kind of a blue finish and the other is a creamier finish. So I apologize for that part. I would tell people if you're making a collection, you want it all on the same paper so you know exactly kind of equivalent. But hopefully you can see how this one stayed a little bit brighter and lighter, where this one, even that undertone, that the highlight area is one step darker. And so again, here's this one change where we've pushed this a little bit further back, but it creates this it creates a different appearance. So now we've got 7 of them. Okay. So really what I want to finish and leave you guys with tonight is that anything you color in with your watercolors, with your colored pencils, with your Copic markers, or any of your alcohol-based markers, anything that you color, this is wonderful to get to this stage. But if you want to push the contrast one pop further, if you want to poke at it, like so it gets one little pop deeper than what you have when you've gotten to this stage, every single one of the color combinations we've used, and it really any skin tone, but even on animals, plants, all of that stuff. Was somebody asking what my paper preference is? Oh, sure, Melanie. So the two that you're seeing here are my favorites. This is the Express It. So that's the Express blending card. And it's Express It blending. The name is just, really? You needed all of that? That's that. And that's this kind of blue. And literally, you don't even have to look at it. I can look away and do this, and I know what this is. It is so smooth to the touch. So that's the Express It. This is a Hammer Mill, and that's the other one. And to me, it's nice to have something that's a little bit less expensive than the Express It that I feel like still has very good blending. It tends to hold things in tight, meaning it doesn't bleed really far, because I do use a lot of ink, and that is my next favorite one. So the creamier one is the Hammer Mill, and it is Color Copy Cover. Hammer Mill Color Copy Cover. And there's a bunch of different weights of this. I've actually used 3 different weights, and I like them all equivalently. So the one benefit, or one of the benefits to the Hammer Mill, is it comes in a weight that's literally a 60 pound, which is really thin. It doesn't even totally feel like cardstock. The bonus is it goes through your printer like a dream. So if you have a printer that has little heart attacks every time you try to put a cardstock through it, the Hammer Mill Color Copy Cover in the 60 pound weight is actually a reasonable Copic paper, and it goes through your printers really, really well. But okay, sorry, sidetracked. So you can always add blush to any of these, but the one thing I tend to add when I'm trying to get really deeper colors and trying to make things give it that pop of dimension is a blue violet. And the next question is always, well, which one do you use with which? Well, you try that. Typically off to the side, you experiment. But things that are lighter, you need to use a lighter tone. Things that as you get darker would use a darker tone. The mid-range ones, like the E1s and the ones I did starting with the E5s, these are trickier because they're right in the middle. So what I would usually do is I would take the darkest color I used on this. This is how I test it. I would take the darkest color. So both of these, I finished with an E55, right? So here's the E55. And then I would take, my favorite group is the BV2s. I would take like my BV20. What happens when I put that down? And I would probably also try a BV23. And I'll show you, I'm pretty sure, this is gonna be a hard one. This is gonna be one of these in-betweens. Yep, I'm actually gonna like that better. My concern when I go all the way to a BV20 is that it's actually bleaching out that color. It's pushing the color a little bit. And so I end up actually leaving, almost like when I'm pushing with a colorless blender, it's actually pushing that ink out of the way. And that's, I don't wanna lighten it. I wanna get it darker. So this one's gonna have to take a little more work. I'm gonna use that mid one, and I'll write it down so you guys can see it. What I'm adding on this one is a BV23. So this, I would truly, where are the darkest spots? And it's not gonna go all the way across her face. Inner ear, right at the edge. It might be right at the corner of her eye, right at the edge of her face, inner ear, and that may be it. The other place that's arguable always is under the chin. But because there's a little bit of a variance here, there's not necessarily a perfect solution. I'm gonna go back with my darkest color and I'm gonna go right over the top of it. And that's going to kind of set that color down in to those earth tones. Now, normally I would do this right as I'm coloring the face versus coming back after I've done all these other faces. This is one of the bonuses of alcohol markers, though, is that we can do this now. And if I need to, I can do a little more blending. Most of the time, though, except I've lost. There we go. I don't think I'll need to do my highlight again. but obviously this pushes that a whole nother level back. Okay, so then the question is, I would do the exact same thing as what I just did here with that testing. And I want to show you on one of these specifically. This would be about the same. I can almost guarantee this is going to be that BV23 on either one of these. But I want to show you what happens because you'll see it more distinctly on these guys. So let's use, so on the little girl, E25 was the darkest. So if I come in and do my E25, and obviously this isn't exact because I don't have all the layers underneath, but watch what happens when I use a BB20. If I came in and added this, trying to make this like blue violet, it literally creates almost a white stripe. And so this is where you have to be really cautious. Now, if I put it on the paper first, so I added that blue violet anywhere where I wanted those really dark shadows and did the E25 on top, I can do that. And I'm gonna get this, look at the difference between those two spots right there, how much darker and cooled down that E25 becomes. But if I'm coming in after the fact, like here, what I want to see is if I'm putting it on top, what happens. So I try the BV23, and unfortunately, even that one is going to push a little bit on those colors. So I'm literally going to have to go all the way out to probably a BV25. And on both of these faces, I would probably need to use that darker blue violet, but I can push those again, same spots right at that corner. If I want to do a little bit right at the inner corner, inner ear, under the chin. And you can debate. I mean, when you do it, you may not need to come back with that earth tone over the top of it. And if I had done this right away, I can almost guarantee I would not need to be coming back with my earth tones. I can, like 99.9% sure, I could just let it sit, and then it would be good to go. So we don't leave her quite so blotchy. I'll do a little bit of pulling that out. But hopefully you can see what a difference adding those kind of blue violet tones in makes. And again, it's that next level. It's adding that pop of wow at the end, that there is absolutely nothing wrong with this grouping that doesn't have the blue violets. The blue violets pushes it one more notch and says, yep, I'm gonna crank that one more time, get a little more pop, get a little more volume and dimension into my image. And when a person looks at it, they're not going, wow, nice use of the blue violets. They're saying, wow, that looks more like a three-dimensional little face. It really pops out at me. And they may not even be able to say three-dimensional face. It just, wow, that image really pops. It really looks great. And they may not be able to describe why. But again, it just adds that next level. Not everyone's ready to add that. So you really need to give yourself some patience about when you start trying to do those next layers, when you're trying to really push those along further. I'm trying to see how much of this I can get on. If you guys want color combinations, hopefully you wrote them down as you went through. I can put it sideways. Maybe that works better. But then you can't see the faces. There's not a good way to set these. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, there's all your faces. If you guys end up having questions later about anything we did here, but also anything Copic related and you're confused or would like more information on, if you tag me in a comment, so make sure to put my name and then kind of add your question, or even in just the Crafting Kimmy and Friends. If you tag me, get my name in there, I will get in there and make sure you guys get questions answered that you have. We will look for a time. Kim said she really wants to do hair if no one else. So, but we could absolutely look at hair, and we could either do these images, or we could go through and look at for some that have some more unique challenges to them. Like there's some really pretty ones that have long braids, and that would be fun to do. But talking about hair, going from simple ones to more complex kind of hairstyles. The color part to me on hair these days is so open-ended, because you can pretty much find hair in every single color under the rainbow. Thank you, Kim. Well, we definitely, let's make sure. So, Kim, I'm making us a mental note, and Carla too. Let's make sure to get a hair tutorial in there. I know the next actual color along I have is not for a couple of months, but if we need to do one before then, we'll kind of sneak it in between moving and all of that good stuff. But if nothing else, we'll make a point of doing it when I am coming back around to the next color along live. All right, ladies. Deb, absolutely. I totally get it. Absolutely would rather be plain as well, but this will all be here, and all that information will be here when you come back and want to check it out. Thanks, you guys, for joining me tonight. Hopefully you got some information that was helpful. And again, just ask questions. If you tag me, then I know I'll get it in my little notice boxes. At least we should. We'll see if that happens. But someone can also tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, Michelle, there's a question over there. All right. You guys have... Absolutely. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, you guys. Have a great night. Have a wonderful, marvelous Monday evening, and I will talk to you guys later.